Morning. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the chance to share with you the bit that I've learned over the past year, writing my first and last book. I can assure you of that. For those of you that haven't really thought about recruiting or hiring, maybe you're a first-time hiring manager, the key thing to know is that 50% of new hires flame out in the first 12 to 18 months. So if you're like most companies, you can literally flip a coin and you will have the same accuracy than if you put candidates through this whole laborious interview and assessment process. So most companies are pretty bad when it comes to recruiting, including my clients. And as an executive recruiter, I started to think about maybe writing a guide or some kind of owner's manual to kind of help them improve. And that then morphed into the book, which I'll tell you about in a bit. But just very briefly about myself, I've been in and around recruiting for about 25 years. I've started 4 businesses. Most recently, Retrofit, which is one of the leading online weight loss companies. It's actually based in Chicago. And then Strong Suit, which is an executive search firm. So I work with VC and private equity firms to recruit heads of marketing, heads of sales, heads of finance, CEOs for their portfolio companies. And that's what got me really thinking about this issue, because we are in a war for talent. We're at 4.1% unemployment, which basically means we're at full employment. So it used to be pretty easy to hire, now not so much. In fact, by the end of this year, we're going to be at 3.5%, which means you're going to see some serious stuff when it comes to competition for talent. And so the timing for the book I thought was pretty good. Unfortunately, I had this light bulb went on a little bit late, and I said, okay, I set a deadline for myself, and then that became the schedule. And it was about 4.5 months from beginning to end. The reason I decided to do the book, frankly, was to make it a business card on steroids. I never had any expectation of selling books. This is not about ego, where I said, oh my God, I got to be an author. I do think that there's a book in all of us. I actually have found that I agree with that now. Getting it out is the hard part. But the real issue and the real reason I did it was, like I said, most of my clients, when I would introduce candidates to them, they had no idea what they were doing. Didn't know how to interview, didn't know how to do reference checks, didn't know how to vet and assess. They could basically flip a coin. And so I said, you know what, I'm never going to present another candidate that I wouldn't put my name on. And so I actually guarantee my candidates for 12 months, because I'm convinced that I just have to introduce great people. And if the client picks 1, 2, 3, 5, I don't even care, because I tee them up that way. But if I left it to their own device, they would make a bad choice. So that's how the origin of the book became about. But then I said, you know what? A lot of companies really struggle with this. Why don't I turn it into a marketing opportunity, much like M1 earlier, where I saw an opportunity to really create a marketing opportunity and to differentiate from the other 90,000 executive recruiters that are in the US. So the executive search industry is basically a bunch of 1, 2, 3 person firms. Most of them not that great. Some of you probably had experience with recruiters. I see a lot of heads nodding. And many of them don't know what they're doing. So I said, here's a great opportunity to really differentiate from those 90,000. The industry is not highly thought of, highly perceived. And I also saw an opportunity to generate leads, because like I said, never expected to make money from the book, but I do a lot of executive searches. I'm always looking for more leads to take on more searches. I do a lot of speaking engagements, such as this, and I'm always looking for more of those. And then I'm launching an online course shortly, which really takes the book and blows it out into a full online video course. So plenty of ways to monetize other than just the book. So that was kind of my original path, and made that decision around this time last year, maybe April last year, to do it. And there were a lot of steps. I had no gray hair this time last year, if you can believe that. But made every mistake in the book. But I started by really thinking about what the book would be all about. And you may not know this, but 85% of business books are not written by the author that you see on the front. So they either use a ghostwriter, a writing firm, some kind of outliner, someone other than themselves. And I'm one of those people. I had the content. I had my thoughts very clear about what the book was about, but I'm not a writer, nor did I really have the time, because it's pretty time consuming. Most people that start writing a book themselves never publish it. So I engaged a ghostwriter to help me do it, and they're phenomenal. There are an army of these individuals, much lower paid than you might expect, because they're struggling writers. Many of them are movie screenplay writers, and they do this on the side. So there are some really bad ones out there too, but if you do a lot of due diligence, get referrals, recommendations, you can find some great ones. And I was fortunate to get a really talented writer. First, I worked with an outliner who helped me really structure the book. She's in Paris. And then I worked with a writer who's in Los Angeles, an out-of-work TV writer who was just amazing at writing the book. But I started with a framework, and I really diagnosed what are the big 10 mistakes that companies make when they hire, because I've seen the same movie over and over, so many times over the course of my career. They don't know what they're looking for. Hiring managers have no idea what interview questions to ask. They skip reference checks altogether. Pretty basic stuff. And then I came up with a diagnosis for each of those 10. So how would you do it the right way if you wanted to increase that 50% accuracy to 90% accuracy? And the hard part was putting pen to paper. Fortunately, I got a bit of a kick in the rump because I was named to Kellogg's faculty last year. So I really had a hard deadline of getting my content together to teach the MBA class there on recruiting. It's about 70 people I teach every year. So it kind of forced me to get my act together and to get the content together. That was really the hard part. Turning it into words was actually much faster. So that was the next step. Coming up with the monetization plan that I described, all the different ways that I would monetize the book. Do not ever write a book thinking you're going to sell books. It's virtually impossible. The average book in the US sells 250 copies a year. It's the average. And I said, mine will be average. Now, fortunately, I beat that a little bit. It was named a best-selling book, but still, I'll never make a penny from the book relative to what I've invested behind it in marketing. And then designing a plan to promote it. I've spent more time marketing the book and designing the marketing for the book than actually writing the book. So without a marketing plan, if you think you'll just write a book and put it out there, you'll sell 250 copies versus 2,500 copies or 25,000 copies, which is kind of my goal for the first year. Cover blurbs are incredibly important. So one of the key decisions that a reader makes when they're going to buy a book is the cover blurbs. And actually who they're from means way more than what they write. So I thought about who my target audience was going to be. It was basically 4 categories: CEOs, venture capitalists, private equity firms, and academia. And so I was able to get the former Twitter CEO, a very prominent venture capitalist, Brad Feld, Chief Innovation Officer at Kellogg, to write great blurbs. You ghostwrite them for them, and they edit them and approve them. But that makes a huge difference, as does the book cover design. So there's a whole body of science on this, if you can believe it, but this has to be legible in this size preview on Amazon, right? That's how people are making their decisions. So you'll have a great cover designer and you'll come up with a great sexy cover, and then you shrink it down to this big and you're like, well, what does that say? So there's a whole body of science on that too. So again, I'm happy to give you some thoughts on that. But the cover, both front and back, was very important, as is the decision on hardcover versus softcover versus Kindle. I went up doing all 3. Then I built a launch team. And so kind of a virtual launch team of specialists, SEO, SEM, a book PR agency and an agent, a course designer, and a couple other folks, a proofreader, etc. We built a microsite, recruitrockstars.com. So it's been a team effort, and I've been kind of the air traffic controller across that team, but they've really done an amazing job making it seem bigger than life. Getting the podcast, getting me placed in the media, and speaking engagements as well. But it really has been more time marketing it than actually writing the book. So like I said, this is the book, and it was named an Amazon bestseller. There's a whole body of science on that too, which I could tell you more than you ever wanted to know about Amazon rankings and ratings. You're not going to be a New York Best Time seller. You're not going to be a Wall Street Journal Best Time seller. But becoming an Amazon bestseller is actually very doable. It's a very achievable goal, and that entitles you to do a lot. So we set our sights on the human resources category, kind of a sleepy little subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory in Amazon, and it did very well out of the gate. So I was able to really activate a community of about 5,000 people to pre-order it, so that we had that spike on the first day of Amazon, and we're able to achieve bestseller status. That then activates the Amazon rankings, as does Amazon reviews. So there's a whole body of science around the Amazon algorithm, which I've had to learn the hard way, where when you get a certain number of positive reviews, who are from people that don't have the same last name as you, and aren't connected to you on LinkedIn, because Amazon's pretty smart, then it kicks in and you start to see this book advertised in many other places on Amazon. So if you're looking for leadership books, kind of the same target audience, you'll see Recruit Rockstars as well. And that really goes crazy, over 50 reviews, which I'm almost at. You would think getting reviews is not that hard, but it actually is. You run out of your mom and dad and your sister pretty quickly, and then you're on to strangers. But it's been very well reviewed with 5 stars as well. So that's kind of a bit about my journey. Just one last thing in terms of timing. I think timing's everything. January is the biggest hiring month of the year, so I knew I wanted to get it out by the holidays. It's also a good book for the executive in your life, kind of a holiday gift. So we launched on Cyber Monday. And it was kind of a pretty good December for the book. Did really well, and then January it's continued that momentum. So I will not be doing a sequel, but I think so far it's achieved its goals. I've gotten 3 random calls from strangers in the past week to come do a paid speech, which was one of my goals, and I'm hoping it'll really differentiate the firm's strong suit in executive search. So with that, I'm happy to answer your questions. Please.
So it sounds like obviously you put a lot into it with the team and marketing, there. What would you say is kind of like the minimum budget you would make something like this thing close to successful?
Much lower than you might think. Probably the biggest component was the writer, right? And I found ghostwriters at $75,000 to $100,000, and then I found ghostwriters at $10,000. So huge variation based on experience, based on their availability too. If they happen to be on the beach not doing a project, they'll get pretty aggressive on the pricing. That's probably been the single biggest investment. Beyond that, publicity. I'm working with a book marketing firm. That's all they do, because that alone is a science. So I'm paying them a bit of money on both a retained and combined performance basis. But the payback, if you have a high enough ticket for upsell, I'll break even within 6 months. But again, if you're thinking you'll do it on the books, forget it. $5 a pop, not going to work. Yes, please.
Did you hire a bunch of marketing specialists to take care of one of those
Yes.
elements? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you integrate all that information, you as the decision maker?
Yeah, so I left out a little thing. I used to be a head of marketing. So I was the first head of marketing for Dyson. We launched Dyson in the US. So if I was not a marketer, I probably would have hired that air traffic controller, but I had the benefit of a marketing background, studied marketing at Kellogg and Wharton, and so I did it myself. But other than Josh and a few other small firms, I've actually learned hiring specialists is just my preferred style versus hiring big agencies. Josh is as good as they come and his team is amazing, but generally I'm just always underwhelmed with firms I've hired. So I love having specialists, email, SEM, SEO, et cetera. Yeah.
How long did you say the overall process took you from the day you decided to really start?
Yep. So I think I signed the contract with the ghostwriter and outliner in May. And they told me I was one of the fastest they'd ever worked with for about 4.5 months, literally from signing to that arriving in my mailbox. We took some shortcuts. We skipped some steps. There were a few chapters that I'd say I'd give kind of a B to. But I knew if I didn't hit that January mark, it really was going to lose its pop because there is a seasonality to recruiting. Yeah, please. Yes. Oh, okay. How about ladies first, and then we'll come up.
Speed. Hypothetically, say there's someone who's been working on their book for 2 years.
Yeah.
How do you speed them up? What kind of tips might you have to help them?
Are you saying you know someone that's been working on it for 2 years? I think some case studies, and I'm happy to talk with you or that person, right, of what it did for their business. The folks that I worked with at Book in a Box have done about 400 books over the past few years, and they've got case studies galore on who it works for, who it doesn't work for. They're very honest. They turn down a lot of clients because they don't think it'll be successful. Other people are opting for this, just publish a chapter at a time in more of a blog concept and then publish the book as a compendium of those. So I'd probably look at one of those two. But like I said, I'm happy to speak with them. Yes?
So given that this book was written really for thought leadership for your firm, which is high touch,
Yep.
what would you recommend for maybe a company software
Yep.
executive that would be
Yeah.
good for business but also?
Yeah. So the question was, what should the topic be, right? And obviously that's vital, right? You do We did an exhaustive competitive review of books on recruiting. Ironically, there weren't that many that were good. There were a few written really detailed for HR people, but there weren't kind of many high-level recruiting books that in recent years. We looked at what people search for, right? So what are people looking for already on Amazon? I didn't want to try to invent a category of book. It was a combination of what I already had in the can from my Kellogg class, so admittedly that influenced it. But it's much like what we heard with with M1, right? Free, the future of finance is free. You want to stake out a territory, and the book is kind of staking that claim, marking that territory. It cannot be a self-promotional piece. That's not going to work. Your reviews on Amazon will stink, and then from there, you're kind of toast. So it really needs to be a thought leadership piece. I wanted to make mine a very practical, hands-on guide. Here's the 10 ways. It's literally a 10-step process. Others have opted for more of a hoity-toity type of approach. There was a question. Yes?
So we talked a lot about attribution in a direct mail context. Probably a lot more difficult for something like this, but how did you think about attribution and how
Yeah.
do you measure the
Yeah. So I had a little of an unfair advantage being in executive search with 30,000 LinkedIn contacts, 7,000 Facebook friends, a large Twitter following, because I've been in the networking business professionally for 25 years, including 10 in Silicon Valley. So it kind of helped me with that ramp of the email list. It's been all email, build the list. I'm so convinced that that's all it is, especially after the Facebook news last week, right? So attribution has been relatively easy. I don't try to send them to buy the book, right? The lead magnet is register for a free 7-day course, video course, which you're welcome to do at Recruit Rockstars, and it just takes you through everything in the book. You don't want to buy the book, don't buy the book. So I don't care if you spend $10 on the book or nothing on the online video course, but being able to say the course is done by a best-selling author, Kellogg professor, has really helped the response rates and the attribution. Yes, in the back.
What's your ROI to this point once you launched your book? Where's your sales and revenue?
It's a little hard to tell because my sales cycle for executive search and speaking engagements is a little bit on the longer side. But when I run the numbers, it's as close to infinite as I'd ever want to see. Based on what I spent on the book, booking one executive search will pay for everything I've spent. So I have a very high ticket item. For those of you that don't know, an executive search might be $50,000. Speaking gig might be 5 to 10 for a few hours time. So I don't know that this works for a low ticket item product. I think that really is something to think about, and ROI would be much more sensitive there. I'll be very honest, I don't know. If you had a $10 a month SaaS platform, I don't know. You got to figure out how to monetize it. It might be through consulting services or some other way if you get creative. But in my case, I literally did the numbers on the back of an envelope and haven't looked back. So, very good. Well, thanks again. If I can help, I'm at jeff@strongsuit.com, so feel free to email me.